Welcome back. Today we're going to look at section 9.2, which is on the law of cosines. You'll notice the objectives. We've got the last two of our types of triangles to solve, side angle side and side side side. Those are going to require a new formula, which is called the law of cosines. And then we'll just do a word problem just to kind of show you an application of using the law of cosines. All right, so the next part of these notes is exactly like what was on section 9.1, and that is just to remind you about the fact that these formulas are only used for oblique triangles, again, triangles that are not right. Okay, if you're going to use a right triangle, remember those will be your trig ratios, all your sine, cosine, tangent values, opposite over hypotenuse, all of the ratios that go with a right triangle. So you only are going to use the law of sines or the law of cosines with non-right triangles. So we already did the law of sines, and we took care of all of these types of triangles when you're given angle, side angle, angle, or side, side angle. So today we're going to look at two others, side, 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 and side angle side. You'll notice on both of these you're given more sides than angles. So when you're given more sides than angles, that's when you're going to use the law of cosines, okay? So we're going to look at both of those examples in just a minute. So underneath here, we're going to start with the side angle side case, but the formula for the law of cosines is the same no matter what. And even though they list three formulas here, it's really just the same formula based on the side that you're given or the angle that you're given. So you're either only going to be given one angle. So if you're given one angle, then you know which formula you're going to use because you're going to use the formula that's based on the angle you're given. If you're given all three sides, then you're going to look for the largest side. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So just notice the formula, no matter which one you use, it's kind of like the Pythagorean theorem first, even though your A, B's, and C's are in different places. So notice the letter or the side that's on the left will correspond to the angle you're going to use in the problem. So if you have angle A, then this is the formula you will use. If you have angle B, you'll use the middle one, and if you have angle C, you'll use the last one. But regardless of which one, that side squared will equal the other two sides squared added together. So that's always the same. And then you are always going to subtract 2 times these two sides that are on the right. So AB on the bottom, AC in the middle, times BC, okay? And then always times the cosine of that angle. So this side and that angle always have to be the same. All right, so we're going to look for side angle side first. So the steps basically are we're going to find the length of the side that's opposite the known angle using the law of cosines. And then we're going to go back to using the law of sines to find the measure of the angle opposite the shorter of the two given sides. So always, and I said this I think on the law of sines video, that when you're using the law of sines, you always find the smallest angle first or the smallest side. So I think I mentioned that sine and small both started with the letter S. So for cosines, you're going to do the largest. If you use the law of cosines, you will look for the largest side or the largest angle first, okay? So this is telling you back to the law of sines, we're going to look for the shorter of the two, the smaller one. All right, and then we find the measure of the third angle, obviously, by subtracting the other two angles, because remember, all three angles have to add up to be 180 degrees, okay? All right, so you need to know your law of sines, law of cosines formula as we move forward. So we're going to start with a side angle side problem. And remember, the side opposite the angle is always the same letter. So this is side A, and this is angle A that's given. So side angle side, and we're given angle A, means we will start with the formula A squared. So let's try to learn it as we go. So whatever you put here, the other two sides will be on the right, and you always add those. So A squared equals B squared plus C squared. Then you always subtract 2 times these two values, so 2 times BC, and then you're going to multiply that times the cosine of the angle A. Okay, so not a hard formula, it just depends on what you're looking for. That's how you know which of the three to start with. All right, so then this one you're just putting in your values. So we're looking for A. So let's talk about B is 19, so that would be 19 squared, plus c, which is 22 squared, minus 2 times 19 times 22, and then we'll multiply that times the cosine of a, which is 38 degrees. Okay, so that's all multiplication right there. So this you can put right into your calculator just like it is. Okay, so if we look at 19 squared plus 22 squared minus 2 times 19, I'm putting it in exactly like I wrote it, times 22 times the cosine of 38 degrees. Okay, and remember your calculator needs to be in degree mode since we're doing degrees, so double check that you're in degree mode before you get this answer. So we'll hit enter. Remember that's a squared, okay? So if a squared equals that, then we're going to take the square root of that. And we will get 13.6, it says round to the nearest hundredth, so 6.5, okay? So again, I'll write that a squared equal 186.22301, and a is the square root of that, which we got 13.65, rounding to the nearest hundredth, okay? So that's just, so when you have side angle side, the law of cosines becomes just basically plug it into your calculator. All right, so now we have side A, which is 13.65. Okay, hang on just a minute. Sorry about that. I had a timer going off I forgot about. All right, so now we're going to look at finding the rest of the triangle. So now that we have angle A and side A, we can now go back to the law of sines. Because remember, you can only use the law of sines when you have the two pieces opposite each other. So for me to find angle B or C now, I can just go back to the law of sines, which is just an easier formula for this. You could still use the law of cosines, but most of you guys will choose the law of sines. All right, so remember, since we're now back to the law of sines, we're going to look for the smaller one first. So since angle B would be smaller because side B is smaller than side C, I'm going to look for angle B. So to find B, I'm going to start with the given opposite two things that I have. So I'm going to do the sine of 38 degrees over, now that I know that's 13.65, equals the sine of B over side B, which is 19. Okay, so we're going to cross multiply. So we have 13.65 times the sine of B equals 19 times the sine of 38. Divide both sides by 13.65. And then we'll take the inverse of that number, right? So let's go ahead and find that. So the sine of B equals, so we're going to do 19 times the sine of 38 and divide that by 13.65. Okay. I lost a 3 there, so let me redo that. Take that and divide it by 13.65. There we go. So 0.85696. We'll just round it there. But that, remember, is the sine of B. So now to find B, you're going to take the inverse sine of that. Okay. So we're going to do second sine on your calculator of this, right? And that'll give us our degree, so 58.97. So let's go ahead and round that to 59 degrees. Okay, so there's B, which is 59 degrees. All right, and then lastly, to find C, you just add these two angles up and subtract them from 180. So we have 180 minus 38 minus 59. So we end up with angle C being 83 degrees. Okay? So we solve that triangle. So that's what we got for angle C. Okay? All right, so that was a side angle side problem. You're using law of cosines to help you find that first missing side, and then back to the law of sines to find the other angle that you needed. Okay? All right, now we're going to look at the last of our options, which is what happens when we have side, side, side. Same formulas, that doesn't change, but now when you're looking for an angle, you have all three sides, you got to find an angle. So again, when you're using the law of cosines, you want to look for the largest first, always. So sine is the smallest, cosine would be the largest, okay? Largest side, largest angles. All right, so that's how, again, you're going to know which of these to use based on which angle you're looking for, okay? All right, so let's do one of those. All right, so we're solving this triangle. Notice we have no angles, we have three sides. So based on this, side B is the smallest of the three sides, so angle B is the smallest. Side A is the middle side, so that would be the middle angle. And so we need to start by looking for angle C first, because that's the largest. So if I'm going to look for C first, then I know which formula I need, the one that starts with C. So remember, it's C squared equals the other two sides squared minus 2 times these two sides, AB, times the cosine of the angle that corresponds with this side. All right, so this one is, you got to be careful. This you can't just put in your calculator. Some of you guys will make this mistake, so listen to me as we go through this and pay attention to the order. So we're going to fill in our numbers. So C is 12.3 squared. A is 10. B is 8.7 minus 2 times 10 times 8.7 times the cosine of C. So remember, we're looking for the angle, so we're going to have to use the inverse functions at the very end. Now, here's what a lot of students will do wrong, is you want to put this whole thing in your calculator and get that answer, and that is incorrect. Remember, order of operations, you have to multiply first. So all of this is being multiplied, so you can't break this up yet. So you can go ahead and do this on your calculator, and you can do this on your calculator, but you cannot subtract those two numbers, okay? So let's go ahead and get that down. So we've got 12.3 squared. Let's go ahead and simplify that. So 12.3 squared is 151.29. 10 squared is 100. Well, let me go ahead and do all of that. So 10 squared plus 8.7 squared. I'm going to add those together. So that gives us 175.69. 175.69. So you can go ahead and do that together. Now we're going to do minus, and we're going to multiply 2 times 10 times 8.7. So 2 times 10 times 8.7 gives you 174. So this is 174 times the cosine of C. So that cannot be broken up. You can't subtract before you multiply. So we're solving this. We got to use algebra. So the next step would be to just subtract this term over here. So we're going to subtract 175.69 from 151.29, okay? So 151.29 minus 175.69 gives us a negative 24.4. That would equal negative 174 cosine of C. Okay, now we're solving for C, so next step will be to divide both sides by negative 174. So we're going to divide by negative 174. Okay, so negative 24.4 divided by negative 174 equals 0.140229. That equals the cosine of C. So remember, to find C, we would find the inverse of that. Okay, so second cosine on your calculator of the decimal, and that gives us 81.9. Let's call it 81.9 degrees. Okay, so there's angle C, 81.9 degrees. All right, now we're going to go back. Now that we have an angle in the opposite side, we can go back to the law of sines to find either A or B. And remember, when we do law of sines, we want the smaller one first, so we're going to be looking for B. Okay, so we're going to do the sine of C over C equals the sine of B over B. All right, so the sine of 81.9 over side C, which was 12.3, equals the sine of B, that's what we're looking for, over side B, which is 8.7. All right, so we're just going to cross multiply. So 12.3 times the sine of B equals 8.7 times the sine of 81.9. Divide both sides by 12.3. Okay, and then we'll get that decimal, and then we'll take the inverse to solve. All right, so we've got 8.7 times the sine of 81.9, and then we're going to divide that by 12.3. So the sine of B is 0.70026. Take the inverse sine of both sides, and that'll give you angle B, so second sine. So 44.4 degrees. That would be that would be angle B, 44.4. And then to find your missing angle, these two subtracted from 180. So angle A is 180 minus 81.9 minus 44.4. So that will give you 180 minus 81.9 minus 44.4. 53.7. Okay, so we've solved that triangle based on starting again with the law of cosines and then bringing us back down to the law of sines. So you can see that it's very similar to do those problems. Okay. All right, the last one on here again is just a word problem. So you just basically have to set it up and follow the rules, and then you look for what you're looking for. So this one says a triangular playground has sides of 475, 595, and 401. Those are the lengths of the sides. So this is a side problem. What are the measures of the angles between the sides to the nearest tenth of a degree? All right, so if we have a triangle, the smallest side, just based on my picture, is 401, so I'll put that over here. So here's angle A. The next biggest side is 475, it looks like here. So again, just making it look kind of like what it says. And then the biggest side would be here, 595. So we'll call that side angle C. Okay, so I just did the smallest, medium, biggest, ABC. All right, so we're looking for the angles again. So this is just like example 2. So we're going to start by finding the largest angle since we're going to use the law of cosine. So that's C. So C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2AB cosine of C. Okay, so learn that formula. Hopefully you already got it down. So C is 595 squared. A is 401 squared B is 475 squared. 2 times 401 times 475 times the cosine of C. So remember, this is just like the last one. You can do this together, and you can do this together, but that is it. Okay? So 595 squared, get some big numbers here. So that's 354,025. So then you're going to do 401 squared plus 475 squared. That's 386,426 minus 2 times 401 times 475. And that is 380,950 cosine of C. So just be careful that you don't accidentally subtract those two numbers first. All right, so the next thing, remember, would be to subtract this over to this side. So you're going to take 354,025 minus 386,426. So that gives you a negative 32,401, and that would equal negative 380,950 cosine of C. Then you're going to take this number and divide it. So we're going to divide by negative 380,950. So that gives us 0.085053. That equals the cosine of C. Take the inverse of that, and that'll give you angle C. So second cosine, so 85.1 we'll call it. So there's angle C. Okay? All right, next we're going to find the smallest angle, which would be angle A, since we're now going to go back to the law of sines because I have these two. Now, could you use the law of cosines again to do this? Yeah, you could, but again, it's more work, as you can see. So most of us aren't going to choose this. Law of sines is just much quicker. So we're going to use sine of C over C. Those are the two pieces that I know. And I'm going to look for the sine of A, because that's the smallest of the leftover angles. So we have the sine of 85.1 over 595. And then we're looking for the sine of angle A over side A, which is 401. Okay, so do your cross multiplication. 595 sine of A equals 401 sine of 85.1, and then divide both sides by 595. So I'm going to put all that in my calculator, get the decimal in a minute. Okay, so let's put that in the calculator. So the sine of A is 401 sine of 85.1. Divide that by 595. So that's 0.671486. Take the inverse sine of that. And we end up with 42.2, round that to the nearest tenth. So there's side A, angle A, 42.2, and then define B. Subtract both of those from 180. So 180 minus 85.1 minus 42.2. Angle B, 52.7. Okay? All right. So there are your law of cosine. So again, side angle side, that's the easier one. That's just straight in your calculator. And then if you're given side, 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 then you got to do that work up here and just watch your steps on that. Okay? It's not that it's hard. You just don't make any careless mistakes. All right, so get that formula memorized, work on your homework. Let me know if you have any questions.